Welcome to this session, which is Public Media, Strengths, Opportunities, and Threats. And we have an exceptional panel here today to discuss what's happening in public media and what that means for journalism and a well-informed public in general. I'm Lisa Waananen Jones. I'm faculty here in the Murrow College in the Journalism and Media Production Department. It's great to see some students, former students, colleagues in the room here today. I also have the pleasure of briefly introducing our panelists, who will also introduce themselves more thoroughly as we begin. So we're going to start with our guests who are visiting us here in Pullman. David, if you guys don't mind kind of giving a little wave when I introduce you. Okay. David Fischer is the president and general manager of KNKX Public Radio of the Seattle-Tacoma area. He's been in that role since 2024 and previously served as CEO of Tacoma Arts Live for nearly 2 decades. His broad experience in nonprofit service includes working to secure state legislation allowing communities to tax themselves in support of arts, science, and culture. Cole Medina is the president and CEO of Blue Mountain Community Foundation based in Walla Walla. He's back in his hometown in this role for the past 5 years after extensive experience on the West Side serving nonprofit organizations and working as a local elected official. He is one of the founding board members of the Washington News Fund, a new effort for raising funds to strengthen journalism in Washington State. We're so glad you could join us here in Pullman. It's fun. We're now going to go to our representatives from our own Northwest Public Broadcasting, based here at WSU. Rachel Sun is a multimedia journalist with NWPB, working on both radio and print stories with an emphasis on healthcare. Rachel has worked around the region since graduating from Murrow College. And since we have quite a few students here, I'll also mention that Rachel was involved with the Evergreen and backpack journalism and the very first rural reporting plunge that we did back in 2018. And last but certainly not least, we have Cara Williams-Fry, who is the general manager of NWPB and has been in that role since 2022. She has a background of more than 2 decades in public media and commercial television. NWPB is a member station of both NPR and PBS and has expanded its reach and impact under her leadership. And it's almost entirely to Cara's credit that we have this impressive panel here today. She did the vast majority of the organizing, which we really appreciate, and thank you for bringing us all together. So we just have one other kind of starting piece before we get to questions, because as our group was planning for today, it came up that we should start with the essential question of what is public media? And Cara reached out to Scott Detro, a longtime friend who got his first job at her previous station. So she was his boss's boss. And he's also better known these days as the host of All Things Considered, so NPR's flagship news program. So we have a video message from Scott before hearing from our panelists, and hopefully I can play this correctly.
Hey, it's Scott Detro, one of the hosts of All Things Considered. Like a lot of us, I have spent a lot of time over the past year thinking about the future of public media. And I've got a few contradictory thoughts right now. I think on one hand, it's really hard out there right now, right? We all know that. We have seen the budget cuts. We have seen the pressure from public officials. We have seen the fact that a lot of stations have had to close their doors or do a ton of layoffs just to be able to get by at this moment where this funding that we had relied on for decades suddenly evaporated, and there's a good chance it's never coming back. And at the same time, I think there has never been a greater opportunity for public radio, and there has never been a greater need for public radio and public media. On the local level, we are seeing the constant closure of trusted local news sources, newspapers, TV stations, websites that just don't have the business plan to keep going, all over the place, just consolidation. We're seeing news sources pivot to AI-generated text or just walk away from the local reporting that used to be the hallmark of what they do. On the national level, we have seen a really cynical decision-making by big corporations that own broadcast news outlets to try to change their journalism in order to escape scrutiny or regulation, or in order to get deals approved by the federal government. I don't think it's ever been this blatant before. And this is obviously, all those things are a real problem. And I feel like on so many of these fronts, public radio is the only solution, and the thing that our readers and listeners and viewers are looking to give them news that's just escaping on other fronts. Like on the local level, it's the stations that are able to sustain the local journalism to cover City Hall, to cover communities, to cover state houses that otherwise aren't being covered now. On the national level, we at NPR are able to say, we are not corporate owned. We are not trying to get a merger approved. We are not trying to, have some sort of deal to make more revenue. We are a nonprofit with a mission focus, and that mission is covering the news. So I think at this moment in time, we have to figure out how to get through the hardship. We have to come up with really strong plans, really durable plans to make sure our journalism is as good as it's been before, even if we've had to cut resources and lose staff, to make sure that our journalism is stepping up to fill those gaps created by the erasure of newspapers. And then on the organizing side, on the fundraising side, we need to figure out how to make the next 10 years work. We were able to get so many contributions over the past year when we said this is a crisis and we've lost our funding. Does that last for a long time? I don't know. We need a plan to get there, and we need to all work together on the editorial side, on the management side, to figure out what sort of changes we need to make so that we are continuing to be relevant 5 years, 10 years, 15 years, 20 years down the line. Because it is clear that at the local level and on the national level, the people who rely on us to be informed, they really need us. So thanks so much for thinking about this too.
Great. A lot of thought-provoking ideas there. We're going to turn to our panel now, but I do want to point out that I just really want to hear you all talk too. So if at any point we need to take this a different direction or you want to ask each other for follow-ups, please feel free to do so. I'm hopeful that this is just a conversation where we get to dig into some of those issues. Let's start with a similar question that we will hear from each of you, and also give you a chance to introduce yourself a little bit more and what your work is like. What does public media mean to you, and how do you see your role in it? And just for this question, we'll start with Cara, since you really brought us all here today.
Thank you, Lisa. So I agree with a lot of things that Scott said, there's no doubt. Last year, 2025, was just a really, really difficult year for public media, and that includes NWPB. And one of the things that I wanted to talk about public media and NWPB is we are located right here on the WSU campus, and I've met students that didn't even know that there was a public media station here. So we're an NPR and a PBS station, and what that means is we're a joint licensee, so we have radio and television, and we're right there in Murrow and Jackson Hall. So if you ever want to visit and you haven't met us before, we're here, we're accessible. But 2025 was really difficult. A lot of us have talked for years about losing federal funding, and that happened with the rescission vote last year. And it was not only the rescission of our previously scheduled money, because we were forward funded by 2 years. So if it would have just been that amount of money that we lost, and for NWPB in cash, it was about $1.1 million. But if you add in all the programming and the services and the things that CPB gave to us as part of this, national local collaboration, it comes to about $2 million. And that's not just $2 million this year. It's next year and the year after that and the year after that. And not only did they take the forward funding away, they took the funding away immediately. So as of, October 1 of this past year, 2025, there was no check coming in. And so it does make us all wonder and think about public media. And I've had a lot of people ask me, is public media going to go away? And my answer is no, it's not, because public media is more important now than ever. And I just want to do a little history piece on this. Public media started with the Public Broadcasting Act in 1967. And this was a huge and important moment in time. It was signed by President Lyndon B. Johnson, and it created the Corporation for Public Broadcasting. That's CPB, which everybody heard about last year. They didn't quite understand it, but they heard about it. And CPB was created to be a private nonprofit entity designed to distribute federal funding to local stations and supporting programming and to ensure high quality educational content for children and cultural and informational content. And that's for everyone. It was always intended to be for all Americans across the nation. The network of NPR and PBS covered 99% of this country. And we're here for everybody. And there was a big push. Our mission is to serve our communities. And so local matters, because we can hear all the national news blurbs, but people really want to know about their neighbors, their communities, their region, and each other. So I'm passionate about public media. Even if I didn't work in public media, I would be an advocate for public media, because it is important to have trusted journalism. It is really important to have quality education for children. It's important to bring people up and uplift them with arts and cultural, information. And then our biggest thing in my mind is we serve the community. So we are a community, we want to gather community together. We want to be a place where people feel they belong. And that is my mission, my goal. Every single day I come to work, I work hard, I lean in, because I care about public media. And it's going to last a long time beyond me.
David, let's go to you next. How do you see public media and your role in it?
Sure. I'm going to kind of tack on to some history stuff
Good.
that you started with, and maybe to move broadcast forward to 1987. And that is the year when President Reagan rescinded what was known as the Fairness Act. It seems kind of geeky to talk about, but really that was set up so that corporations could run newsrooms and be insulated from the financial effects of advertisers and the financial effects of driving the corporation to a bottom line of profit. In 1987, the president rescinded that. And that opened the door to see a conversion from news into opinion, and then from opinion into division. And that is what we've grown up with over a 40, 50-year period. Got even worse in 1996 with the Telecommunications Act under Bill Clinton. That opened up the internet, that opened up what has become social media. And then to fast forward to the dialogue that was happening around the CPB this year, the conservative message was, we don't need government funding anymore. Look, we have ubiquitous access to information through social media, through websites, through commercial entities. Completely avoiding the dialogue around the corporate, financial, and advertising influence that has affected news gathering and news reporting and converted it, as I said, into opinion and division-based work. So, what has separated public media is that we have no bottom line to answer to, except that we have to balance our books. But we have no bottom line to answer to for advertisers, and haven't ever. So with the rescission this year, our station turned to our listeners, and instead of driving an emergency campaign, we said, look, we want to take the next year. This rescission happened in July of 2025. We said by May of 2026, we are inviting the community to step up to replace sustainable funding with sustainable funding. Would you please become a monthly donor? Essentially, subscribe to our radio station. And we happen to know that that model has about a 90% retention rate. So it's not a one-time gift that disappears the next time around as much, we think. So we'll find out as we go through year over year. But we are really happy to say we set a goal of 5,000 sustaining monthly donors. And we met that in March ahead of schedule. And we exceeded our budget this year significantly. So we've kind of helped build up a reserve fund. And thanks to the energy driven by the conservatives, our community responded in a really positive way, and we are in a stronger position for it. I think I'll stop there.
Okay.
Thanks.
Thank you. Yeah. Cole, let's go to you. I think you deserve credit for actually raising this question in the first place. But what is public media to you?
Sure. I'm going to start by telling you what AI says it is. So let's see. Public media refers to media platforms that serve the public interest. I think that's pretty straightforward. And I'm doing this, and we're giving all these answers because there is no single definition of public media, in case that isn't clear. I couldn't find an actual definition in a dictionary somewhere. But AI heading on here, this includes various forms of communication such as television, radio, print, and online content that are accessible to the general population. Public media organizations often prioritize community needs and are typically funded by public sources, making them more responsive to local audiences. Examples include NPR, PBS, and Northwest Public Broadcasting. It's right here. No, I'm kidding. It didn't.
I know you are.
Yeah.
That's culprit.
Which aim to provide informative and educational content rather than focusing solely on profit. I think that's a fine definition. I'll give you my definition of it and kind of explain why I'm here. So I'm not in the journalism field. I'm not in the news field. I feel kind of like the odd duck up here. I'm in the philanthropy field. I've spent my career working for nonprofits, raising money for nonprofits, and the last 15 years giving away money to nonprofits and students as scholarships. What I have come to realize a long time ago is this: reliable, relevant local news is foundational to civic life and to everyday life. The civic life part of that really means it's foundational to holding our elected officials accountable. If we don't have news, we can't hold the people who make big decisions in our lives accountable for what they're doing. So it's absolutely critical to that. But it's also critical to just about everything that we do in life. I had the opportunity to be at the Knight Media Forum in February, and the CEO of the Knight Foundation said this. She said, at its core, the First Amendment is about trust. Jack and Jim Knight, the two fellows who formed the Knight Foundation, built their newspaper community on trust. They built a very large newspaper business and basically donated that to charity through the Knight Foundation. Some of you probably know that. They gave their readers something precious, reliable information. They knew that the First Amendment safeguards the free flow of information, that it protects our rights to hold, share, and discover different perspectives. They knew that trust is the soul of democracy. I think public media in the world of journalism is the most trustworthy source of news in our communities. It is the most trustworthy place to receive reliable, relevant local news. And therefore, I'm here because I want to support it. I don't think anything else in our society will function if we don't have good news. And the best news, I think, comes from public media because it's public. I'm not going to bash all the corporately owned media in the world or in our country, but I know that public media, which for me means media that is not owned by a corporation, media which is owned by a nonprofit, is the most reliable media and the most important for us if we want to maintain our First Amendment and maintain democracy.
Rachel, let's go to you.
Yeah, so these are all great answers. I think to start off with, to answer this question, I want to talk about the reason that I wanted to be a journalist, which is that I wanted to serve the public and do a public good with the skill set I had. And I'm not a civil engineer, I'm not a scientist, I'm not good at, a lot of skills that one might think of when they think of a government worker or someone in the public sector. But journalism at its best is for the public. It is giving people the information they need to make informed decisions. It's helping them find something new and exciting that they might want to get involved in. It can be a lot of different things. But the reason I was so excited to be able to come to NWPB about 4 years ago is because public media structurally really prioritizes all the things that I wanted to do in journalism. So, like David pointed out, we're not answering to shareholders or advertisers. We're answering to the public, to our audience that we serve. And it always comes back to, what are we offering our audience? What are we offering the people who are in our coverage region? What information do they need to make decisions in their lives, to, just find something new and exciting, to just have a better life? And so I think that public media, more than any other type of news media, is able to do that because of the way it's designed. So, we rely on donors now more than ever, and we answer to them, and I really appreciate that.
One of the things, Rachel, just talk a little bit about the fact that we do a lot of in-depth reporting. Mm-hmm. So there's concepts around 45-second little hits of news about terrible, terrible things in the world. Mm-hmm. We don't do that. So kind of explain the philosophy when you're in the news meeting in the morning talking about some of the stories you want to do.
Yeah, so this is something I actually wrote down some notes about to talk about for one of the other questions. But the news cycle right now is really overwhelming to a lot of people, including me. And these constant, here's what's happening now, here's the next epic, here's the next one. It gets to be a lot, and I think people tune out after a certain point because it's just too much. You freeze up, you're I can't take any more of this. And so the philosophy I have, and I think a lot of the other reporters I work with have, is what is the information that we can provide to people that will actually help them? Not just here's one thing after another that's going to stress you out, but here's an explainer on this new type of healthcare approach that you might be interested in, or here's what you need to know about this vaccine. And I think that, breaking complicated things down in a way that people can understand, especially when there's just this onslaught of information constantly, is something that our audience really appreciates.
I agree. And NWPB has all news station, but we also have a news and classical station combined, and the classical music gives people a respite sometimes from the news. And we also have a jazz station, and so does this person. And music and arts is so important. It's always been important, but I think in the last few years, you put a number to it, you have to have a place to go. You have to have a safe space. So I've always thought of public media as a very safe space for my children, for myself, for my mental health. And I find myself, punching away to our jazz station in my car, or, asking Siri to change it. And for you to have that mix of news and jazz, it's got to feel really good. And our donors and our listeners, they like having that.
I agree. We hear from our listeners all the time that balance gives them a way to stay engaged in the news without becoming completely overwhelmed by it, and gives them a way to connect to the human spirit and to be refilled, get that cup refilled and energized, and not be in a bleak place. And then to your point, Rachel, I think our news director is really trying to move our reporting more and more to what she is referring to as solutions-oriented journalism, which is very much what you're talking about. And we don't want to just report, in the 80s they would say on the nightly news, if it bleeds, it leads. We don't want to just be starring in that, right? We want to provide ideas for change, ideas for community and civic engagement on whatever the problem may be, and where are problems being solved. And so we spend a lot of time on that as well. So.
One of the reasons, like, I really wanted David on this panel with us was because across the state, we collaborate. The thing about public media that is so awesome is that we share. We will work together. He might have somebody on the west side and we might have someone on the east side who works together. We work together in the Northwest News Network. We share content. We elevate other reporters and their stories across the entire region. And that's really important to us because in this day and age, there are not enough of us to go around. There's just not. There's a lot of work. There's a lot of stories. And if we collaborate, and that's one of the future focused things, public media has done it more naturally than anyone in commercial, but we also need to work together with commercial media and with print media and all of that. We need to be able to help to inform. So like when NWPB releases a story, I get some newspapers sometimes, can we print this? Yes, as long as you give proper credit, we're here to educate, we're here to inform, we're here to give you the information you need to be able to make good decisions in your life. So as far as I'm concerned, share and share broadly.
Absolutely.
Let's go. This is a good segue to sort of another question, which really is about how public media can balance innovation and tradition. We're kind of hearing a little bit of both. You're constantly iterating, you need to change, you need to update things. At the same time, we have these core values, and that's what really drives what we do. And even in the message earlier, we heard the phrase that stuck with me was continue to be relevant, right? You know, how do we continue to be relevant to the public while also tackling some of these challenges? This can go to anybody, but what are you thinking about when you are planning for this idea of balancing innovation with the values that you've always held?
I think that the strengths that public media has haven't really changed that much over the decades when it comes to, like, you know, we've built a really trusting relationship with our audiences. We are probably more trusted than almost any other news media when it comes to our reliability. You know, we do a really good job with that. And I think that our mission reflects that. I think one of the areas where public media has struggled is that, like Cara mentioned, people sometimes don't even know that we exist, or they think maybe, you know, all public media is NPR, or they think that NPR is now gone. We're not really just on people's radars that much, and especially for young people, it's not a thing that comes up a lot. And so we have this really strong base with, like, people who are middle-aged and older, who love us, who trust us, and then a lot of younger people aren't really connected with that at all. And so I think public media has struggled figuring out how to make that connection. And it's not because the stories that we do are necessarily not relevant to young people, or that they don't care about quality journalism, because I think they really do, but we haven't always figured out how to meet people where they are. And so I think part of the problem is when you get a room full of people, you know, let's say 40 and over, talking about how to appeal to 20-year-olds, it's tough because even if you have data on, like, okay, these are things that, you know, people in this age demographic like, here's the platforms they're using, you don't necessarily always understand why something appeals to them, like the underlying reason. And so you get ideas like, oh, we need to be on TikTok. We need to do this specific trend because that's trending right now. And you ask a 20-year-old, and they're like, that was 6 months ago. And I think part of the solution is bringing in more of the people who you're trying to appeal to and, like, asking them to lead that charge. So earlier we were just talking with Sydney Reed, who's a student who works with us. And, you know, Sydney has done a great job on with a lot of different things we've thrown at her, but one of them is social media and helping us like polish that and get it more off the ground and be relevant. And so I think that's really important. And then I think it's also important to note that, like, you know, at the end of the day, I think everyone wants to have a news source they feel that they can trust, that provides digestible information and that helps them deal with the problems that they're dealing with in life. And you know, back to the point about solutions journalism, like, are we actually looking at what people need more information about or need help with in some way? And so, you know, you need to engage the people who are, you need to engage your target audience, not just by throwing stuff at them, but by asking them what's relevant to you. And then also, like, remember, they're not an alien species. They're just like going about things in a slightly different way, but those core values stay the same. So hopefully that answered the question.
A couple things come to mind, just to kind of go off what you're saying, Rachel. One of them is that I'm going to come back to that. The other is, I think we have to find I guess I'm not really the we,
We're
but
we. You're we.
you know, public media, news, journalism needs to find a way to, on the back end of the operations, work together more. Not just on the front end, which I think is great, Cara. I know you really believe in that, sharing stories across different public media outlets, but also on the back end. I think there are a lot of efficiencies that can be found on the back end of organizations. Every single organization doesn't need to spin up its own social media system. There can be people behind them who spin them up for multiple organizations. And coming back to social media, I feel like lots of journalism, lots of news outlets, not just public media, but all across the board, kind of missed the boat on social media when it was getting started 2 decades ago. And just didn't get on there quickly enough. And so the people who were on social media got attached to other outlets that weren't really maybe providing them with very good news, but that's what they came to know and trust, and so that's what they're with. And now public media and other news outlets are trying to catch up, but it's really hard to catch up. So at the Night Media Forum, they gave a couple examples of how public media and other outlets are catching up. One is an example of this guy, I won't remember his name, but he is on multiple channels, social media channels, and he doesn't go out and produce any news. He doesn't go interview people, and he does it all in Spanish. All of his stuff is in Spanish. He just reads the news from respected news outlets. People might know who I'm talking about. I don't remember his name. Because he's the most watched Hispanic kind of news person on social media. He just reads what other people report, and then he puts it into a podcast or into a TikTok video or whatever, and just tells the people who trust him what the news actually is. Those people won't trust going to NWPB or somewhere else, but they'll trust what he tells them the news said. When Maduro was taken from his country, this guy woke up that morning, he's like, oh my God, my phone's blowing up, what happened? And he quickly looked around at the news, and because people were like, is this true? Is this really happening? And he's like, yeah, and he just put out a quick video and told them what had happened, and he had 26 million views in like an hour. And the point is, at the Night Media Forum, was find people like this who are already doing social media and partner with them. Bring them into your organization in some way. There was another example of a guy who's just through social media outlets does food. He's a food critic. And there was some newspaper somewhere that just brought him in as their food critic. And boom, they instantly had a big social media following because he had a social media following. So that's an idea.
Well, your phrase catch up is something that public media has been doing for a long time. We've been trying to play catch up. I mean, it's been 10, 15 years we've been talking about not relying on federal funds, but we still kept relying on federal funds. And then last year, we got kicked in the butt, so to speak, and we lost it. So we can talk about it forever, but we need to actually change. And one of the things that I think is really important is to find new ways and to find people who are already at the cutting edge. But we also really need to respect how galvanizing that moment was for the public. We did get more attention and more donors and more listeners over the last 6 to 9 months just because they heard about this. They might not have thought that they cared about public media. They might not have thought about how much they used public media, but all of a sudden they did, with the idea that it might go away. And so we know, GMs and CEOs and reporters and news directors across the nation are talking about how do we take this moment where everyone's been galvanized and keep it going. Like, there's going to be another crisis somewhere with some organization next month, right? So we can't expect the money and everybody to keep coming. So that's one of the things. So again, we're talking about it, but what is the it? Rachel said a few minutes ago, and unfortunately, public media has often been, the best kept secret, but it is really good quality. And so we just have to make sure that everyone out there in the audience has the opportunity or the belief to tell us what it is that they need. So what we need to do is listen. I mean, the word listen, I think, is, if I had to sum it up in one word, how we move forward, it's listen.
I agree. I also totally underscore that we have to get storytellers out there who look like the audience we want to attract. In addition to that, I would also underscore we have to focus on human stories, on the humanity of how we are all together. We have to focus on empathy and give an opportunity to not take the bait to be othered, and to really focus our storytelling in a manner that is inclusive, in a manner that respects all sides, even when we detest what's being said, but that we can stand in the middle of that storm and be able to bring forward truth and facts in a manner that shows the humanity of what's going on. I think that is going to energize all ages and everybody. So the more we can do that, the better. And the more we can lean into cultural engagement, the better. Because culture stories, music, theater, dance, art in general is a portal into seeing the world differently. It's a portal into looking at the world through an artist's eyes that kind of whacks us upside the head, and we go, oh my God, I never thought about it that way. That's fantastic. The more we can do that, the more inclusive and the more engaging it's going to be for all ages as well. So I think, these things, I'm not sure that's innovation. I think it's embracing our human traditions better and not becoming too policy wonky along the way.
Great. Looking at the time, this has been great. I'm going to go to the room for questions if anyone has any, just because I can kind of feel like there's some out there that maybe you want to ask. And we'll prioritize students. Are there any questions you want to ask right now?
I heard the phrase solutions. Hi, I heard the phrase solutions journalism or solutions driven journalism. I'd love to hear a little more about that. How did it come about? What does it look like? Thank you.
I work with the Solutions Journalism Network a lot, and I promise I did not plant that question. So we'll go to any of you who want to answer.
Yeah. Well, it's funny because, Lisa, I remember, I think I heard about solutions journalism in your class first. So kudos to you for being on top of things.
Journalism.
Yeah. But solutions journalism is, I guess, basically looking at a problem that people have and how are we fixing it. And a lot of the times it's looking at, a given community or individual who found something that worked for them and being like, okay, what did they do? How did it differ from maybe other attempts that were less successful? and why. Where could this be applied somewhere else? Where is it maybe very specific to this problem? And just like, what can we learn from it? So instead of always reactively going, oh, there's a problem, everybody look at the problem, which is also important that people know when something wrong is happening, but trying to get ahead of that and being like, okay, what's something that people are doing in their community that is actively making it better? Yeah.
And solutions journalism, I mean, has really come into its own because people want to hear. Communities, neighborhoods, everybody is different, right? So we're not trying to say that the solution that works in this community is like a carbon copy, you just put it into your community, but it's giving you ideas and then you take it and make it your own. And that's one of the things that I think in public media, especially, we do a lot. Like we might have a great program at NWPB and then another station, a couple states away is like, oh, I love that idea. Well, here's how we did it. You could take it and make it your own. So, it just gets exhausting to hear about the problems all the time. So offering solutions or offering arts or offering we're always going to do news. We're always going to do it really, really well. And we care deeply and passionately that it's trustworthy and it's what you need to make your own decision. But we don't have to do it 90% of the time. We can shrink it down to like 60% of the time, opening up this other space for all of these other things that we're talking about. And I'm going to jump in real quick. And one of the things Cole's working on is the Washington Fund, which I think people should hear about because this is one of the innovative new ways to maybe fund some journalism in the state of Washington.
Okay. So the Washington News Fund is the Washington chapter of a national movement called Press Forward. So Press Forward has, I think it's up to 35 different state chapters now, and in Washington we formed the chapter last year, and we ended up naming it the Washington News Fund. And we, as a bunch of community foundations across the country, our goal is pretty simple if you boil it all down. There's lots of words and papers, but if you boil it all down, we want to raise a whole lot of money from other foundations across the state, try to help them understand that they can't be successful at all of the things they want to be successful at if we don't have news to hold everything up. If we don't have good news to hold everything up, everything else kind of goes by the wayside. So try to help them understand that so they divert more money to news, to journalism and media. So the Washington News Fund is just that. It's an effort to get a lot of money into a fund that will support local news across Washington state. And it's really focused on a lot of what y'all have been talking about today. I guess I'll stop there because we're running short of time. That's what it is. Is that what you wanted me to say?
Absolutely.
Okay.
I just think it's good information that, it's not just journalists, it's not just media people who care about the media, right? We all understand that we need good information to make good decisions. And having, foundations across our state and across the country who are coming together specifically to raise money for journalism, it warms my heart.
Thank you. Are there any other questions in the room? Yeah.
Well, all this negativity in the news obviously leads a lot of listeners and watchers to tune out. So how do you, as the people who produce public media, strike that balance of the negative things going on and the human aspect as well?
I would say it's a little tricky on the radio side because our anchor programs are managed through National Public Radio. And they do a fantastic job, and I've been a NPR geek since childhood. And our local news has to fit within those, not always, but significantly has to fit within those programs. And at our station, we do not focus on breaking news. Right? We want to take people deeper, like Cara was saying. So we don't have a lot of time and windows interstitially within those news magazines. So we have to make tough choices about what local news we're going to report. And that's getting harder and harder to do. So I'm out raising money right now to focus on new programming to expand the time frames during which we can share more local reporting, more local news that is outside of the NPR windows. So that's going pretty well right now. It's a $6.6 million campaign. I'm halfway through it, on top of covering the Corporation for Public Broadcasting rescission. So that's all going really well. Getting that foot in the door programmatically is hard, right? Because we also want to keep balance with our cultural programs and our music programs. So we don't have a lot of wiggle there, but we're committed to doing that and making sure that the time we're committing on air is devoted primarily to more local and more grounded stories about who we are in this Washington.
I mean, I think from the newsroom perspective, it goes back to what we were just talking about with solutions journalism and, finding those hopeful stories that are still useful to people. It's not just a fluff piece, but it's like, here's something that's actually working and it's pretty cool. And here's what I can tell you about it. That is a huge part, of, I think, why we're trying to put more of a focus on solutions journalism. Is not only is it helpful, it's hopeful, and it makes people feel good, and it keeps them from just freezing up and tuning out. So that's a really big part. And then I think, just not every story necessarily fits into the strict definition of solutions journalism, but finding things that are hopeful in general. Like recently, I featured a man who lives with cancer, and he he keeps getting tumors come back, and so he's going through this really hard thing, but he has this very hopeful, just vibrant perspective on life. And it kind of the crux of the story was how do you find light and hope and what's important to you when you're dealing with something that's really dark? And I think that that's something that resonates, especially at a time like this. So, just you have to remember as a journalist that there are still good, hopeful things happening, and then look for those to share with your audience.
Do we have maybe time for one more question, if there is one? Yeah.
We're talking about local news,
Yep.
which I think is also an important part of bridging the polarization that is out there in perception politically. But I'm wondering, in terms of what you want to do with feature stories and in terms of the local piece, do you foresee having an opportunity to break into that NPR schedule? So there's a morning 8:45, 15-minute local newscast every morning, or other time segments like that. And that bird may have flown, but I'm interested in your perception of giving me a reason to tune in during the morning drive or at noon or in the evening for a local piece of news that's not coming out of DC.
We are doing that.
Okay.
And at the same time, that's a tough balance because we don't want to step on the quality of what NPR is providing us.
It's a black hole that you have to feed every day.
Well, that we can do. We have a lot of material for black holes, but I think it's just tough to figure out what are we going to step on from NPR, but we do. We've also done this other thing that I've asked the team to focus on, which is bring more music from our jazz side, bring more cultural stories and music stories into the NPR news magazines. And so we've created some features weekly that do that, and we're getting great response from the audience. So we know we're going down the right path. I think we just have to figure out where will this new programming live so it doesn't step too much on NPR.
But we do step on NPR sometimes.
Yeah, we do.
But I also have to say there are people who don't understand the difference between NPR and NWPB. So they will hear a story that they hate, and they will send us an email about how much they hate it, and because it was this, and this, and it's like, okay. So I have to email them back. We email everyone back within 24 to 48 hours. It's their goal. But so we can cover a block. and we will. We can do an 8-minute feature. Because sometimes it warrants that. You don't want to create a longer feature just to make it longer. You want it to be whatever it needs to be, whether it's 2 minutes, 4 minutes, 6 minutes, or 8 minutes. We can make that work within the NPR clock. But yeah, the consistency of, do you always want it at the same time, the same block every day? Can we manage that right now? We absolutely can. We don't have enough staff at this point because the rescission did hit hard. However, one of the things we were able to do, we had a team of people for NWPB's programming. It literally started yesterday, where we revamped like 19 different shows. We either moved where they're placed or we removed them all together and we added new shows. And one of the things that we did very thoughtfully was look at the flow of the shows. Because we've heard a lot, like people listen to ATC, Morning Edition, I'll say. Morning Edition in the morning, and then it goes right into another show that's just talking about the same problem, the same national story, the same issue, often the same guest. It's like hours of it. So we move things around strategically and in a way that we hope people can listen to better. People don't like change, though. We've been hearing a lot about that. But we did a 4-show block on Sundays now that will have All Songs Considered, Tiny Desk Radio, which everybody loves, Alt Latino, and in our own production, Press A to Play, which is about, video game music and what it means to you if you were a kid playing it. So now we have this 4 hours, and someone's like, oh, you're putting music, not 4 hours, 4 shows in 2 hours. Someone's like, oh, you're putting music on the news. It's a conversation about music with music in it. So these are the things we're taking steps to change. But I mean, people have to hear it, and then they have to, talk to others about it. And that's our hope, is we're going to continue on, and we're going to try to answer what the audience is telling us that they need.
Great. Thank you. We are at time for this session, although now I feel like I have even more questions than when we started. If people do want to talk to you around Symposium and later, are you open to that?
Absolutely.
All right. Great. Thank you so much all for being
Thanks
here.
for coming.
Thank you to our panelists.
Thank you.
Thank you.